history is supposed to make sense. You find a pot, you date the pot. You learn something about the people who made the pot. It's a nice, neat story. We dig up the past, and it tells us a linear tale of progress. Simple tools become more complex tools. Mud huts become castles. Smoke signals become fiber optics. But what happens when that story gets scrambled? What happens when you find an artifact that just shouldn't exist? An object with a level of technology that feels centuries, or even millennia, ahead of its time. Not just a little ahead, but so advanced it feels spooky. It's like finding a smartphone in a medieval castle. It just doesn't fit the narrative we've all been taught. These objects are called out-of-place artifacts or opiarts. They challenge our understanding of the past. They make us ask uncomfortable questions. Did our ancestors know more than we give them credit for? Was there a lost civilization with advanced technology? Or are we just misunderstanding what we're looking at? These aren't just curiosities. They are wrenches in the gears of history. They're puzzles that top archaeologists and scientists have been arguing about for decades. And the more you look at them, the weirder they get. Number 18, how did ancient Greeks build a computer? Off the coast of a small Greek island called Antikythera, some sponge divers in 1900 found a shipwreck. It was an ancient Roman cargo ship. They brought up statues and pottery. And they also brought up a lump of corroded bronze. It looked like a rock. It sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens for 2 years. Nobody paid it much attention. Then, in 1902, an archaeologist named Valerio Stais looked closer. He saw that the lump had split open. Inside, he saw something that made no sense. He saw a gear wheel. It was a precision gear with fine, triangular teeth. This was from a shipwreck that dated to around 100 BC. Some gears that weren't supposed to exist until the 14th century in Europe, in the first mechanical clocks. This was the beginning of the mystery of the Antikythera mechanism. For decades, researchers tried to figure it out. It was a slow process. The artifact was in dozens of fragile fragments. In the 1950s and 60s, a British science historian named Derek de Solla Price dedicated his life to it. He used X-rays to peer inside the corroded pieces. What he found was astonishing. It wasn't just one gear, it was a complex system of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears. He published his findings in a famous 1974 article in Scientific American called Gears from the Greeks. He called the device a kind of astronomical computer. It was designed to predict the positions of the sun, the moon, and probably the 5 planets known to the ancients. It could predict eclipses. It even had a dial to track the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. Think about that. 2,000 years before the electronic age, someone built a mechanical computer with a complexity that would not be seen again for over 1,000 years. It had a differential gear, which is a sophisticated setup used in car transmissions today. It was thought to have been invented in the 16th century. The Greeks had it in 100 BC. More recent research by the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, using advanced CT scanning and imaging technology, has revealed even more. They've been able to read faint inscriptions on the device. It's essentially a user manual. They confirmed it tracked the positions of Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The front dial showed the Greek zodiac and an Egyptian calendar. The back dial showed celestial cycles like the Metonic cycle and the Saros cycle, which are crucial for predicting eclipses. Tony Freeth, a member of the project, has said that it's more brilliant than they ever imagined. The mainstream view is that this is a testament to the lost genius of Greek engineering. It shows they were far more advanced mechanically than we ever knew. It was likely built in a workshop, perhaps by someone associated with the philosopher Posidonius on the island of Rhodes, a center for astronomy and engineering at the time. Cicero, the Roman writer, mentioned a similar device built by Archimedes. Maybe these things weren't as rare as we think. But that's where the spooky part comes in. If this technology existed, where is the rest of it? Why is there no mention of how to build such a thing in any surviving ancient text? Why did this incredible knowledge of precision mechanics just vanish for 1,500 years? It's as if someone invented the laptop, made exactly one, and then everyone went back to using abacuses and forgot it ever happened. So what do we still not know? If they can make this, what other machines did they build that now lie at the bottom of the sea or are corroded beyond recognition? Who had the specific mathematical and engineering knowledge to design and manufacture it? And most importantly, why did this technology disappear so completely from history, leaving this one ghostly survivor? Number 17, was there electricity in ancient Iraq? In 1936, workers digging a railway near Baghdad, Iraq, uncovered an ancient village. During the excavation led by Austrian archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, they found a strange little pot. It was about 6 inches tall, made of clay. Inside, there was a copper cylinder, and inside the copper cylinder, there was an iron rod. The top was sealed with asphalt, and the iron rod stuck out through the center of the seal, held in place but not touching the copper. And Koenig was the director of the National Museum of Iraq. He looked at this object and thought it looked familiar. It looked just like a galvanic cell, a battery. He published a paper in 1940 suggesting that this artifact, which dated to the Parthian period around 250 BC to 224 AD, was an ancient electric battery. This became known as the Baghdad battery. The idea was explosive. The battery was officially invented by Alessandro Volta in 1800. Finding one that was 2,000 years older was like finding a jet engine in a pyramid. If you pour an acidic liquid like grape juice or vinegar into the pot, the iron and copper act as electrodes. A chemical reaction occurs and it produces a small electric current, a voltage. The replicas have been built to test the theory. In 1978, a German Egyptologist, Arne Egebrecht, connected several replica batteries together and claimed he used them to electroplate a small silver statue with gold. The experiment was not well documented, so many scientists remained skeptical. And later, the show Mythbusters built their own replicas. They found that a single pot could produce about half a volt of electricity. When they linked several together, they generated a few volts. It worked. It could produce a current. The mainstream archaeological view is much more conservative. Most experts believe the object was not a battery at all. They think it was a storage vessel for sacred scrolls. The copper cylinder would have protected the delicate papyrus or parchment from damage. The iron rod could have been used to win the scroll. Similar objects have been found at other archaeological sites, and they were used to hold scrolls. The asphalt seal would have kept it watertight. This explanation is much simpler and doesn't require a revolution in our understanding of ancient technology. But the battery theory won't go away. Proponents ask, if it was for scrolls, why the specific combination of iron and copper? Those are the two metals you need for a simple battery, and why do all the parts seem so perfectly designed for an electrochemical reaction? Even if the voltage was low, what could they have used it for? Some suggest electroplating jewelry. Others have more esoteric ideas, like using the mild electric shock in healing rituals or religious ceremonies to impress believers to make a statue tingle when you touched it. The context is also a problem. We have found zero evidence of anything that would use electricity from that period. No wires, no light bulbs, no electroplated jewelry that can be definitively dated and proven. There are no texts that describe their use. It's a battery with nothing to power. It's an engine with no car. So we are left with some unsettling questions. Was this really a battery? And if so, how did they discover the principle of electrochemistry 2 millennia before Volta? If they were generating electricity, what did they use it for? And why is there no other trace of this technology? Or is it just a fancy jar for a scroll, and our modern eyes are seeing technology where there is none? Number 16, did the Egyptians have electric lights? In the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, Egypt, there are some strange carvings on the wall. Deep, in a crypt, in a place with little natural light, there is a large, detailed relief. It shows several figures standing around a very large tube-like object. It looks like a giant light bulb. Inside this bulb, there is a long, wavy snake. The snake comes out of a lotus flower at one end. The ILBLB itself rests on a stand called a DJE pillar, which looks like a high-voltage insulator. A cable or cord seems to run from the lotus flower back to a box, where a figure, possibly a god, is sitting. This carving is known as the Dendera light. The theory was popularized by authors like Erich von Däniken in his book Chariots of the Gods. The idea is that this isn't a symbolic religious image, it's a schematic. It's a literal depiction of a powerful electric lamp. The bulb is the glass tube, the snake is the plasma filament, the lotus flower is the socket. The DJE pillar is the insulator, the cable is the power cord, and the box is the generator. Proponents of this theory ask some compelling questions. How did the Egyptians create their intricate paintings and carvings in the deep, pitch black interiors of their tombs and temples? The official explanation is that they used torches or oil lamps, but the ceilings of these tombs show no soot marks. None at all. You can't burn hundreds of torches for years in a sealed room without leaving a thick layer of black soot everywhere. Some suggest they used a clever system of polished copper mirrors to reflect sunlight deep into the tombs. This works, but it's very difficult, and the light gets very dim very quickly. An electric light would solve the problem perfectly. No soot, bright light. The mainstream Egyptologist explanation is completely different. They say this is not a light bulb. It's a well-known part of Egyptian mythology. The scene depicts the birth of the god Harsamtis, who is symbolized by the snake emerging from a lotus flower, which represents creation. The whole thing is happening within the celestial womb of the sky goddess Nut. The Djed pillar is a classic symbol of stability and power associated with the god Osiris. It's a purely symbolic religious image. It's a creation myth, not an electrical diagram. But the alternative theorists push back. They point out the Djed pillar is described in ancient texts as the backbone of a god, and it was said to have a spine of copper. Is it a coincidence that it looks exactly like a modern electrical insulator and is associated with a conductive metal? Is it a coincidence that the snake looks so much like the plasma filaments seen in modern Crookes tubes, an early type of electrical discharge tube? The science doesn't fully support the electric light theory. To create a light like the one depicted would require a huge amount of power and advanced glass-blowing technology to create the vacuum tube. There is no archaeological evidence for any of it. No glass shards from giant bulbs, no generators, no copper wiring found in the walls. Still, the image is uncanny, and the question of the soot-free tombs remains a real puzzle. Were the ancient Egyptians just masters of soot-free lamps and reflective mirrors? Or does this carving at Dendera depict a forgotten technology, a lost light that once shone in the dark places of the pharaohs? Could the stories of gods and magic have been a way to describe a technology they used but didn't fully understand? It's number 15. Why are there ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs of a helicopter? At the Temple of Seti I in Abydos, Egypt, there is a famous and controversial set of hieroglyphs. High up on a stone lintel, there are carvings that look to a modern eye exactly like a helicopter, a submarine, and a futuristic airplane or spaceship. It's not a subtle resemblance. The helicopter shape is unmistakable. It has a main rotor, a tail, and a cockpit. It's so clear that it has become a poster child for the ancient astronaut theory. The theory is simple. Ancient aliens visited Egypt. The Egyptians saw their advanced vehicles and, not knowing what they were, carved them into the temple walls as a record of these sky gods and their chariots. How else could a civilization from 3,000 years ago have produced such accurate images of 20th century technology? This idea became very popular in the 1990s when photos of the Abydos helicopter started circulating on the internet. And it seems like slam dunk evidence. You look at the photo, you see a helicopter. The case seems closed. However, archaeologists and Egyptologists have a very different explanation. And it's a bit more complicated. They say this is a classic case of palimpsest. A palimpsest is a document or a carving where the original text or image has been erased or covered over, and a new one has been put on top. But sometimes, traces of the old one remain visible. In this case, the lintel was originally carved with the titles of Pharaoh Seti I. Later, when his son Rameses II took the throne, he had some of his father's carvings filled in with plaster and re-carved with his own titles. Over the last 3,000 years, that plaster has fallen out. What we are seeing today is not one single image. It's two sets of hieroglyphs, one on top of the other, that are overlapping. The helicopter is a result of the hieroglyph, for he who repulses the 9 bows, one of Seti I's titles overlapping with the hieroglyph 4, he who protects Egypt and overthrows foreign countries, one of Rameses II's titles. The combination of the different symbols, with parts of each one visible, creates the accidental shape of a helicopter. The same goes for the submarine and the airplane. They are all tricks of overlapping symbols and erosion. You can find diagrams online that show exactly how the original symbols combine to create the modern-looking images. This is a very logical and well-supported explanation. It doesn't require any aliens or lost technology. But for many people, it's not as satisfying. They argue that the resemblance is just too perfect to be a coincidence. They say it's a cover-up, that mainstream science is trying to hide the truth. They point out that Abydos was a very important religious center, a place where you would record the most significant events. What could be more significant than a visit from the gods and their flying machines? So the questions remain, is this really just a coincidence, a lucky accident of erosion and plaster? Or did ancient scribes carve what they saw in the sky, creating a message that would only be understood thousands of years later once we had invented the very same machines? And how many other ancient carvings and texts have we misinterpreted because we assume our ancestors were primitive? Number 14 were there prehistoric aviators in South America. In Colombia, a number of small gold objects were discovered, dating from the Quimbaya civilization somewhere around 1000 AD. They are about 2 inches long. For a long time, they were labeled as zoomorphic figures, meaning they were meant to represent animals. Most likely insects or birds. They were put in museums and mostly forgotten. But in the 20th century, some people started looking at them with fresh eyes. They didn't look like any known bird or insect. They have features that are distinctly mechanical. They have triangular, delta-shaped wings. They have upright tail fins like a modern airplane. They have a fuselage. They look, for all the world, like little jet fighters. They are often called the Quimbaya airplanes. The ancient astronaut theorists, of course, love these. They see them as clear proof that ancient people saw advanced flying machines and made small models of them, perhaps as religious offerings. But it's not just fringe theorists who have taken an interest. In 1996, 2 German aviation experts, Peter Belting and Konrad Lubbers, decided to test the idea. They argued that if these were just stylized insects, they wouldn't have so many features that are aerodynamically correct. The wings are in the right place for the center of gravity. The tail fin is designed for stability. They built large-scale, radio-controlled models based exactly on the design of these gold figures. They fitted them with propellers and engines, and they flew. They flew perfectly. The models were stable. They could perform aerobatic maneuvers. The conclusion of Belting and Lubbers was that these objects were not just sculptures. They were representations of flying machines. They had to be. Their aerodynamic properties were too good to be an accident. Mainstream archaeologists strongly disagree. They argue that these are simply stylized representations of animals. The wings are the wings of a flying fish or the fins of a catfish. The tail is the tail of a stingray. The Quimbaya culture created many gold objects representing the natural world, and these fit perfectly within that tradition. They argue that seeing an airplane in them is a form of pareidolia, the same psychological phenomenon that makes us see faces in clouds or the man in the moon. We are projecting our own modern technology onto an ancient artifact. They also point out that there is no other evidence of aviation in any ancient South American culture. No large runways, no hangars, no engine parts. To believe these are models of real aircraft requires a huge leap of faith. But the question is hard to shake. Why do they have so many features that just happen to be perfect for flight? Why the delta wings, a design that wasn't used on a large scale until the 20th century? Why the vertical stabilizer, a feature that no bird or insect has? Building a perfect scale model of an F-16 and calling it a stylized bird seems dishonest. Could the Quimbaya have understood the principles of flight? Did they build large-scale gliders or even powered aircraft that we have no record of, made from materials like wood and fabric that have long since rotted away? Or were they, as some believe, simply recording the strange machines they saw in the skies? Number 13. What is the world's most mysterious book? Oh, it's called the Voynich Manuscript. It's a book about 240 pages long, filled with illustrations and text. And nobody can read it. It was named after Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish book dealer who bought it in 1912 from a collection of books held by Jesuits in Italy. The text is written in an unknown alphabet. The script flows smoothly, as if the writer knew it well. It's not just random scribbles. Statistical analysis shows that it follows the patterns of a real language. It has word frequencies and structures that are consistent with other languages. But no one knows what language it is. The world's best cryptographers, including top codebreakers from World War I and like William Friedman, have tried to crack it. They all failed. The illustrations are just as bizarre. There are detailed drawings of plants that don't match any known species on Earth. There are astronomical charts with strange suns and moons and zodiac symbols. And then there is the most famous section, the balneological section. It shows pages and pages of small naked women, often with swollen bellies, bathing in or connected by an elaborate network of green liquid-filled tubes and pools. It's weird. It's like a medieval biology textbook from another planet, Carbon dating by the University of Arizona in 2009 placed the manuscript's creation between 1404 and 1438. This makes it a genuine late medieval artifact. So what is it? There are a few major theories. The first is that it's a cipher. It's a known language like Latin or Italian that has been encrypted using a complex code. The problem is that no one has been able to find the key. The patterns don't match any known cipher from that period. The second theory is that it's a real, but unknown or lost language. Perhaps it's an early attempt to create an artificial language like Esperanto centuries before its time. Or maybe it's the last surviving text of a language that has otherwise vanished without a trace. Recently, some researchers have claimed to have decoded parts of it, suggesting it might be a Proto-Romance language, or even a form of Hebrew, but none of these claims have been widely accepted by the academic community. The third theory is that it's all an elaborate hoax. Perhaps some clever alchemist in the 15th century created it to sell to a rich patron, like the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who was known to be obsessed with alchemy and curiosities and is a documented owner of the manuscript. The creator could have just scribbled nonsense text that looked real enough to fool someone. The problem with the hoax theory is the complexity. The linguistic patterns are very sophisticated for a simple forgery. It would have been an incredible amount of work for a hoax. The manuscript remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the history of cryptography and linguistics. It's a locked box with no key. What secret knowledge does this book contain, if any? Was it a medical encyclopedia, a book of alchemy, or a record of a completely alien worldview? Who was the author, and why did they go to such incredible lengths to conceal their message? And will we ever be able to read the words of this book from a world that seems so close, yet so impossibly far away? Number 12. How could a 16th century map show Antarctica without ice? In 1929, a German theologian named Gustav Deissmann was working in the Topkapi Palace Library in Istanbul, Turkey. He was cataloging old books and found a piece of a map drawn on gazelle skin. It was dated to the year 1513. It was signed by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis. The Piri Reis map shows the coasts of Europe, North Africa, and Brazil with incredible accuracy. That part is not so strange, but what is strange is what it shows on the southern edge. It appears to show the northern coast of Antarctica. This is a problem. Antarctica was not officially discovered until a Russian expedition in 1820. How could Piri Reis have known about it 300 years earlier? But it gets even weirder. The coastline shown on the map appears to be the coasts of Antarctica under the ice. The map shows a landmass where today there are miles of thick ice sheets. We only know what that subglacial coastline looks like because of modern seismic sounding and radar technology used in the 20th century. Piri Reis himself wrote on the map that he didn't draw it all from his own experience. He said he compiled it from about 20 older source maps, including some from the time of Alexander the Great and some maps drawn by Columbus. This led to a theory most famously proposed by Professor Charles Hapgood in his 1966 book, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. Hapgood argued that Piri Reis had access to maps made by a very ancient lost civilization. A prehistoric seafaring culture with a worldwide knowledge of geography. This civilization, he argued, must have mapped Antarctica when it was free of ice, which was thousands of years ago. Hapgood and his students at Keene State College studied the map projection. They claimed it was a sophisticated azimuthal equidistant projection centered on Cairo, a very advanced technique for the 16th century. The U.S. Air Force Reconnaissance Unit even looked at the map in the 1960s and confirmed that the coastline shown did bear a striking resemblance to the subglacial landmass of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica. The mainstream explanation is much less dramatic. Cartographers and historians point out that the map is not as accurate as Hapgood claimed. While the Atlantic coasts are good, other areas are wildly distorted. The Antarctic coastline, they argue, is not Antarctica at all. It's most likely a distorted and speculative drawing of the coast of South America, which was common on maps from that period of exploration, where explorers would just keep drawing the coastline south, guessing what might be there. They might have been incorporating myths of a great southern continent, the Terra Australis Incognita, which was a popular idea at the time. As for the resemblance to the subglacial coastline, critics say it's just a coincidence. They also point out that the map has many annotations, and there are none that mention ice-free land or ancient sources for the southern part of the map. Piri Reis was a known collector and compiler of maps. It's more likely he pieced together contemporary Portuguese charts. But the mystery persists. How could that coastline, drawn in 1513, so closely match a landform we only discovered with 20th century technology? Was Charles Hapgood right? Was there a lost civilization of mapmakers whose work survived in fragments, only to be copied by an Ottoman admiral? Or is it all just a coincidence, a case of our brains trying to find patterns in a chaotic early map of the world? Number 11, who made a Bronze Age map of the stars? It was 1999. Two amateur treasure hunters with a metal detector were illegally digging in the Ziegelrode forest in Germany. They found a bronze sword, 2 axes, some other items, and a flat bronze disc. The disc was about 30 centimeters in diameter with a blue-green patina. Inlaid on it were gold symbols. There was a large circle, a crescent moon, and a cluster of 7 small dots. Later, a curved gold band was added to the side, and another opposite it was lost. Another curved band was added at the bottom. This became known as the Nebra sky disk. At first, the archaeological community thought it was a modern forgery. The design seemed too modern, too abstract. But scientific analysis proved them wrong. The copper and the bronze came from mines in the Alps. The gold came from Cornwall in England, and microscopic analysis showed it was genuinely ancient. It was dated to around 1600 BC. That's the Bronze Age. It's the oldest concrete depiction of the cosmos ever found. Archaeologist Harold Meller was key in authenticating and interpreting the disk. He and other researchers figured out what the symbols meant. The large circle is the sun, or maybe a full moon. The crescent is the crescent moon. The cluster of 7 dots is the Pleiades star cluster. This cluster was important to ancient cultures all over the world. Its appearance in the sky marked the beginning of autumn and the end of summer, a crucial time for agriculture. The gold bands on the sides were the most incredible discovery. Each band spans an angle of 82 degrees. This is the exact angle between the position of the sunset on the summer solstice and the winter solstice at the latitude of Nebra, where the disk was found. This means the disk was a tool. You could hold it up on the local mountain, the Mittelberg, and when the sun set behind the horizon covered by the gold band, you knew it was a solstice. The curved band at the bottom is interpreted as a sunboat, a common religious motif from the period, representing the sun's journey across the night sky. This object is revolutionary. It shows that people in Bronze Age Europe had a sophisticated understanding of astronomy. They weren't just passively watching the sky, they were measuring it. They were creating complex astronomical clocks to manage their lives and their agriculture. This level of astronomical knowledge was not thought to have existed in Central Europe at that time. It was thought to be confined to places like Egypt and Babylon. The mainstream view is that this disk is a masterpiece of early science. It combines religious symbolism, the sunboat with precise astronomical observation, the solstices, and the Pleiades. And it's a combination calendar, star chart, and religious object, but there are still so many spooky questions. How did they achieve the 82-degree angle so precisely? This requires a deep understanding of the sun's yearly cycle. Who was the astronomer priest who designed this, and how did they pass this knowledge on? The disk also suggests a complex trade network, with copper from Austria and gold from England making its way to central Germany. It paints a picture of the Bronze Age that is far more sophisticated and interconnected than we previously imagined. Is this a unique object, the work of a single genius, or are there other similar devices that have been lost or are still buried? What other complex scientific knowledge did these Bronze Age Europeans possess that has left no other trace? Number 10, can science explain the world's most famous relic? The Shroud of Turin is a long linen cloth that bears the faint sepia-colored image of a crucified man. The image shows both the front and back of a man with long hair and a beard who has wounds and bloodstains that correspond to the biblical accounts of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. There are marks of whipping, a wound in the side, and small punctures around the head consistent with a crown of thorns. For millions of believers, this is the authentic burial shroud of Jesus. The history of the shroud is long and convoluted. It first appeared in documented history in the 1350s in Liry, France, in the possession of a knight named Geoffroy de Charny. The local bishop immediately declared it a fake, saying he had spoken to the artist who painted it. The Catholic Church has never formally endorsed it as the true shroud of Christ, but it is revered as a powerful icon. The scientific study of the shroud began in earnest in 1898 when an amateur photographer named Sekendo Pia was allowed to photograph it. When he developed the photographic plates, he was stunned. The image on the shroud was a negative. On his photographic negative, the image of the man appeared as a clear, detailed positive. This was a shocking discovery. How could a medieval forger have created a perfect photographic negative, centuries before the invention of photography? This discovery kicked off a century of intense scientific investigation. The Shroud of Turin Research Project, STURP, in 1978 conducted a series of non-destructive tests. They concluded that the image was not a painting, there were no paint pigments, there were no brushstrokes. The image is incredibly superficial, affecting only the very top microfibers of the linen cloth. They also confirmed the reddish stains contained hemoglobin and were real blood. They concluded that the image was a mystery. The biggest bombshell came in 1988. The Vatican allowed small samples of the shroud to be cut off and sent to 3 different laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona for radiocarbon dating. All 3 labs came back with the same result. The linen cloth dated from between 1260 and 1390 AD. This fit perfectly with the time the shroud first appeared in France, and the bishops claimed that it was a forgery. For many, this was the end of the story. The shroud was a medieval fake. A clever one, but a fake. But the debate didn't end. Proponents of the shroud's authenticity have raised questions about the carbon dating. They argue that the sample was taken from a corner of the shroud that was repaired by nuns in the 16th century after a fire. They say the sample was a mixture of original linen and newer cotton threads, which would skew the date. Ray Rogers, a chemist from the STURP team, published a paper in 2005 arguing that the sample area was chemically different from the rest of the cloth, supporting the repair theory. However, this view is not widely accepted by the scientific community. The image formation itself remains the core mystery. How was it made? If it's a forgery, it's the most ingenious forgery of all time. No one has been able to successfully replicate it with all its unique chemical and physical properties. Theories range from a simple rubbing or dusting technique to a complex proto-photographic method using chemicals and sunlight. Some have even suggested that the image was burned onto the cloth by a powerful burst of radiation, perhaps from the body at the moment of resurrection. So we are left with a contradiction. The most reliable dating method we have says it's medieval. But the image itself is unlike anything ever created before or since. Is the carbon date wrong? If it is, how do we explain the lack of any historical record before the 14th century? If the carbon date is right, how did a medieval forger create an image that continues to baffle 21st century science? And what kind of event could leave a photographic negative of a body on a cloth? Number 9 were crystal skulls. A message from an ancient intelligence. They are one of the most iconic and mysterious artifacts. Skulls carved out of single pieces of clear or milky quartz crystal with a level of craftsmanship that seems impossible for pre-Columbian cultures in Mesoamerica where they were supposedly found. They are known as the crystal skulls. The most famous is the Mitchell Hedges skull. It was supposedly discovered in the 1920s by Anna Mitchell Hedges, the adopted daughter of a British adventurer, in the ruins of a Mayan city in Belize. It is made from a single block of clear quartz and is anatomically very detailed, with a separate detachable jawbone. For years, Anna Mitchell Hedges claimed it was 3,600 years old and had magical properties. It was said to be a tool for healing and prophecy. The legend around the skulls is that they were made by the Maya or the Aztecs, or perhaps an even earlier, unknown civilization like Atlantis. There is a story that there are 13 ancient crystal skulls, and when they are all brought together, they will reveal crucial knowledge about the origins and destiny of humanity. The spooky part is the supposed craftsmanship. Proponents claim that the skulls show no tool marks. They are so perfectly carved that they must have been made with a technology far beyond what the Maya or Aztecs had. They didn't have iron tools or modern carving equipment. The claim was that the skulls must have been painstakingly ground down with sand and water over hundreds of years, or made with some kind of lost advanced technology. In the 1970s, the Hewlett-Packard laboratories reportedly studied the Mitchell Hedges skull and were baffled, concluding it would be impossible to make today without breaking the crystal. However, the scientific reality is very different. In the 1990s and 2000s, scientists at the British Museum and the Smithsonian Institution used scanning electron microscopy to examine the most famous crystal skulls, including one held by the British Museum and one held by the Smithsonian. The Mitchell Hedges skull was not made available for this level of study. Their findings were conclusive. The skulls were modern fakes. The microscope revealed tiny circular marks on the surface of the crystal. These marks were characteristic of modern, high-speed, rotary carving tools, like a jeweler's drill, that were not invented until the late 19th century. The quartz crystal itself was from Brazil or Madagascar, not Mexico or Central America. It turns out that there was a thriving market for fake pre-Columbian artifacts in the late 1800s. A French antiquities dealer named Eugene Bobon was a key figure. He seems to have been the source for most of the large crystal skulls that ended up in museums. They were likely manufactured in Germany, a center for fine gem carving, in the 1870s or 1880s, and then sold to collectors as genuine Aztec or Mayan artifacts. The entire story of Anna Mitchell Hedges finding her skull in a Mayan ruin seems to have been invented years after the fact. Her father actually bought it at a Sotheby's auction in 1943, so the scientific consensus is clear: the famous crystal skulls are not ancient. They are 19th century hoaxes, but the legend is powerful. Why do people still believe in them? The idea of ancient, powerful objects holding the secrets of the universe is very appealing. Even if the big skulls are fake, does that mean all of them are? Could there be a genuine ancient crystal skull out there somewhere? And if the known ones are fakes, why were they made? Was it just for money, or was there another stranger reason to create these beautiful, eerie objects? Number 8, how did the Romans master nanotechnology? In the British Museum, there is a stunning piece of Roman glass. It's a cup called the Lycurgus cup. It dates from the 4th century AD. What makes it so special is its color. In normal, reflected light, like daylight, the cup is a murky jade green. But when you shine a light from inside the cup, it glows a fiery, translucent red. This color-changing property baffled scientists for centuries. How did the Romans do it? It wasn't until 1990 that British researchers, using powerful microscopes, figured out the secret. The Romans were masters of nanotechnology. They had impregnated the glass with microscopic particles of gold and silver. The particles are incredibly small, only about 50 nanometers in diameter. That is 1,000th the size of a grain of salt. The precise mixture and size of these nanoparticles is what makes the glass change color. When light hits the cup, the electrons in the metal particles vibrate in different ways depending on whether the light is coming from in front of or behind. This phenomenon is called surface plasmon resonance. It's a high-tech field of physics that we are only now beginning to explore for things like medical diagnostics and electronics. The Romans somehow had figured it out 1,600 years ago. This is not supposed to be possible. Creating nanoparticles and mixing them into glass in exactly the right proportions to get this effect is an incredibly delicate process. Most archaeologists believe it must have been an accident. Perhaps a little bit of gold and silver dust got mixed into a batch of glass by mistake, and the result was so beautiful that the artisan kept the cup. But the cup's intricate carvings, which depict scenes from the myth of King Lycurgus, suggest it was a luxury item of the highest order. It was not a cheap mistake. It seems unlikely that such a valuable object would be the result of a complete fluke. It seems more likely that the Roman glassmakers knew exactly what they were doing. They had a recipe? This raises so many questions. If they had this technology, what else did they use it for? The cup is one of only a handful of surviving examples of this type of glass known as dichroic glass. Was this technology widespread and most of the evidence has been lost? How did they grind gold and silver into particles of a specific nanometer scale size? Did they have some chemical process for it? The knowledge was clearly lost. After the fall of the Roman Empire, no one was able to create anything like this again until the modern era. It's another example of a technology that was so advanced it just disappeared from the world. Was this really an accident, a 1 in a million lucky shot? Or were there Roman workshops that had secretly mastered a form of alchemy, manipulating matter at a scale we are only just beginning to understand? What other secrets of nanotechnology are hiding in the dust of the ancient world? Number 7, what were these mysterious Roman objects for? All across the northern provinces of the former Roman Empire, from Wales to Hungary, archaeologists have been finding strange objects. They are called Roman dodecahedra. They are small, hollow objects made of bronze or, more rarely, stone. They have 12 flat, pentagonal faces. Each face has a circular hole in the middle, and the holes are all of different sizes. There are also small knobs at each corner where the faces meet. About 100 of them have been found. They date from the 2nd to the 4th century AD, and nobody has any idea what they were used for. There is not a single mention of them in any surviving Roman text or image. Their purpose is a complete mystery. This has led to a lot of speculation. The theories are all over the place. One idea is that they were measuring devices or surveying instruments, but the holes are not standardized and there are no markings on them, which you would expect on a measuring tool. Another theory is that they were toys or dice for a game we no longer know the rules to. This is possible, but they seem very complex and difficult to make just for a simple game. A popular theory is that they were some kind of astronomical device used for determining the optimal sowing date for winter grain. The idea is that you would look through one of the holes at a certain time of year, and when the sun's angle was just right, you knew it was time to plant. This is a clever idea, but it's very hard to prove. Some people think they were religious or cult objects, perhaps used in rituals by the Celtic peoples who lived in these Roman provinces. The lack of them in the heart of the empire in Italy and Greece supports the idea that they were a provincial phenomenon. Another practical idea is that they were knitting tools for making the fingers of gloves. You could stretch the woolen threads over the knobs and knit through the holes. Reenactors have shown this is possible, but is it the real reason? And of course, there are the more esoteric theories, that they were scepter heads or magical devices for fortune telling. Their complex geometry and the careful craftsmanship that went into them suggests they were important. They weren't just casual, everyday objects. The mystery is why there is no record of them. The Romans were meticulous record keepers. They wrote about everything. The fact that these common over 100 have been found and complex objects are never mentioned is deeply strange. It's as if their function was a secret or so obvious to the people of the time that no one ever bothered to write it down. What was the purpose of these intricate and beautiful objects? Were they a tool for farmers, a toy for children, a gauge for soldiers, or an instrument for a secret druidic cult operating within the Roman Empire? And why did the knowledge of what they were for vanish so completely? Number 6. Who built an advanced sewer system? 8,000 years ago. In the Highlands of Scotland, near the city of Glasgow, lies a large, flat sandstone slab covered in strange carvings. It's called the Cocknow Stone. It's about 42 feet by 26 feet, and it's covered in dozens of abstract symbols, mostly cup and ring marks. These are circular indentations surrounded by concentric rings. There are also spirals, grooves, and a strange four-toed footprint. The carvings date back to the Neolithic or early Bronze Age, around 3000 BC. They were made by some of the earliest farmers in Scotland, and we have no idea what they mean. The stone was excavated in 1887 by a man named James Harvey. It became a popular local attraction. But by the 1960s, it was suffering from vandalism. People were carving their own names over the ancient symbols and painting on it. To protect it, in 1965, archaeologists from the University of Glasgow decided to do something drastic. They buried it, they covered the entire stone with several feet of soil to preserve it for the future. For 50 years, the Cocknow Stone lay hidden. But in 2016, a team of researchers using modern 3D imaging technology got permission to re-excavate the stone and create a detailed digital record of its surface. This allowed them to study the symbols in more detail than ever before, without risking damage to the stone. The carvings are part of a tradition of prehistoric rock art found all across Atlantic Europe, from Spain to Scandinavia. But the Cocknow Stone is one of the most complex and impressive examples. What were our Stone Age ancestors trying to say? There are many theories. One is that it's a map. The symbols could represent stars, constellations, or features on the landscape like hills, settlements, or rivers. It could be a celestial map tracking the movements of the sun and moon, or it could be a map of the earth, a guide to the local area. Another theory is that the symbols are religious or ritualistic. They could be part of ceremonies related to life, death, and rebirth. The cut marks might have been used to hold libations or offerings. The spirals could represent the journey of the soul. Some researchers have suggested the patterns are a form of writing or proto-writing. Each symbol could represent a concept or a word. If so, it would be one of the oldest and most mysterious scripts in the world. The problem is, we have no Rosetta Stone for this kind of art. There is no other text to compare it to. The meaning was likely passed down orally and has been lost for thousands of years. The people who made these carvings left no other written records, so the stone, now reburied for its own protection, keeps its secrets. Was it a map of the heavens or the earth, a guide for ancient travelers or astronomers? Was it a sacred text, a place of ritual where people connected with their gods? Or was it something else entirely, a message from our distant ancestors that we are no longer able to understand? Number 5, why can't we read the writing of the Minoan civilization? On the island of Crete, the ancient Minoan civilization flourished during the Bronze Age. They were a sophisticated culture with grand palaces like the one at Knossos, beautiful art, and extensive trade networks. And they had a system of writing, or rather, they had several. In 1908, an Italian archaeologist named Luigi Pernier was excavating the Minoan palace at Phaistos. He found a strange clay disc. It's about 15 centimeters in diameter and is covered on both sides with a spiral of stamped symbols. There are 241 symbols in total, made up of 45 unique signs. The symbols are pictographic. They show people, animals, tools, and plants. This is the Phaistos disc. It dates to about 1700 BC, and it is completely undeciphered. It is a unique object. No other artifact like it has ever been found. The symbols are not painted or carved. They were pressed into the wet clay with pre-made stamps or seals. This means it was, in a sense, the earliest example of printing with movable type. Someone went to the trouble of creating a set of 45 stamps to produce this one object. What does it say? No one knows. The text is too short, and the language is unknown. Without more examples of the script, it is almost impossible to crack. Theories abound. Because it was found in a temple, like part of the palace. Many believe it's a religious text, a hymn, or a prayer. The spiral form could suggest a magical chant. Others think it's an administrative document, a list of something. Or maybe it's a story, a piece of Minoan literature. Some linguists have tried to connect the language to known ancient languages like Greek or Luwian, an ancient Anatolian language, but without success. There is even a theory that the disc is a modern-day hoax, created by Pernier himself to gain fame. But most archaeologists dismiss this. The archaeological context of its discovery is solid. An analysis of the clay shows it is consistent with other Minoan artifacts. The Phaistos disc is a ghost from the Minoan world. It's a tantalizing glimpse into their language and thoughts. It's frustrating because it's so clearly a sophisticated text. It's not just random scribbles. It's a message carefully laid out and printed. Who created this beautiful and enigmatic object? Was it a poem, a prayer, a royal decree, or a legal document? Why was it made with such advanced technology as movable type, a technique that would not be reinvented for another 3,000 years? And will we ever find another text that holds the key to unlocking its secrets? Number 4, were there 10,000-year-old iron pipes in China? In a remote and largely uninhabited part of China's Qinghai province, there is a mountain called Mount Beigong. Near the mountain are 2 lakes, one freshwater and one saltwater. And on the south shore of the salt lake, there is a strange pyramid-shaped outcrop about 60 meters high. The front of the outcrop has 3 triangular caves. Inside the caves and on the surrounding shore are dozens of iron pipes. They range in size from a toothpick to over a foot in diameter. They run through the rock and down to the lake. They look modern. They look like a plumbing system. They're known as the Beigong pipes. The spooky part is their supposed age. In 2002, a team of Chinese scientists reportedly went to the site to study them. They used a technique called thermoluminescence dating on the surrounding rock and sediment. The results suggested the pipes were ancient, very ancient. Some reports claim they could be 150,000 years old. This would place them in a time long before humans were thought to have any knowledge of smelting iron. Even the more conservative estimates place them around 5,000 years old, still far too early for the complex ironworks found there. Analysis of the pipe's composition was also strange. They were mostly iron oxide, but they also contained a high percentage of silicon dioxide and an unusually high amount of an element that could not be identified. This led to wild speculation. The story went viral on the internet. Were the pipes the remains of an ancient lost industrial complex? Or, as many suggested, were they the work of aliens? The site was dubbed an ET launching pad. The story seemed to have everything: mysterious pyramids, ancient advanced technology, and a remote exotic location. However, the scientific reality is probably much more mundane, though still fascinating. Geologists who have looked at the evidence have a very different explanation. They believe the pipes are not man-made at all. They are a natural geological formation. The theory is that these are fossilized tree roots or reeds. In the distant past, this area was much wetter. Trees grew, and their roots pushed down into the mud. Over time, through a geological process called concretion, iron-rich minerals in the groundwater seeped into and collected around the decaying root matter, forming hard iron-rich casts. The surrounding mud and sand turned to rock, and the original organic material rotted away, leaving behind the hollow, pipe-like structures. This would explain their age and their strange chemical composition, which is consistent with the local geology. This process can create very regular, pipe-like shapes that look artificial. So the mainstream scientific view is that the ET launching pad is a natural wonder, not an artificial one. The story of the mysterious elements and the 150,000-year-old dates seems to have been exaggerated by the state, run Chinese media at the time to promote tourism to the remote area. But for some, the explanation is not enough. The pipes look too regular, too much like a real plumbing system. The idea of nature creating such a perfect illusion of technology is hard to accept. Are we sure they are just fossilized roots? Could there be a core of truth to the original story of a lost ancient technology high on a remote Chinese mountain? Number 3, what are these 2.8 billion-year-old metal spheres? Top miners in South Africa, working in pyrophyllite mines near the town of Ottosdal, have been finding strange little spheres for decades. They are found in a mineral deposit that is dated to be 2.8 billion years old. The spheres are known as the Klerksdorp spheres. They are small, from a few millimeters to a few centimeters in diameter. They are typically reddish-brown, and they are very strange. Some of them are perfect spheres, others are more flattened, and many of them have perfectly straight, parallel grooves running around their equator. They look manufactured. The problem is the age in 2.8 billion years ago. There was no complex life on Earth. There was only single-celled bacteria and algae. There were certainly no intelligent beings with the technology to create precision-machined metal spheres. This has made them a favorite of alternative history writers and ancient astronaut theorists. They are presented as definitive proof of a civilization that existed on Earth billions of years before humanity. The grooves are seen as evidence of machine tooling. The perfect shape is seen as evidence of intelligent design. The story is that these objects are so impossible, they must be artificial. Geologists, however, have a straightforward explanation. They say the spheres are natural concretions. A concretion is a hard compact mass of mineral matter that forms when minerals precipitate around a nucleus, like a grain of sand or a fossil fragment, inside sedimentary rock. They can often be almost perfectly spherical. The process is a bit like how a pearl forms inside an oyster. The material of the Klerksdorp spheres is either hematite or wollastonite. The surrounding rock is soft pyrophyllite. As the soft rock erodes or is mined away, the much harder concretions are left behind. Geologists who have cut the spheres open say they have a fibrous internal structure radiating from the center, which is typical of this kind of natural formation. What about the grooves? Geologists explain that this is also a natural feature. The spheres formed in fine layers of sediment. As the concretion grew, it might have been constrained by these layers, creating the fine parallel lines around the middle. It's an artifact of the sedimentation process. So, like the Baigong pipes, the scientific explanation is that they are a natural phenomenon that just happens to look artificial. They are not manufactured. They are not billions of years old artifacts, but the mystery is compelling. Can nature really create such perfect shapes with such regular straight grooves? It feels counterintuitive. They look like something you would find in a ball bearing factory, not in a 2.8 billion year old rock. Is the geological explanation the whole story? Or are these small grooved spheres a message from a time so deep in Earth's past that we can't even imagine what kind of life might have existed? Number 2, why has this iron pillar not rusted in 1,600 years? In the Qutub complex in Delhi, India, stands a remarkable monument. It's an iron pillar. It's about 23 feet tall and weighs over 6 tons. It was erected in its current location in about 1233 AD, but an inscription on it says it was originally erected by a king named Chandra, probably Chandragupta II, around 400 AD. This means the pillar is about 1,600 years old. The amazing thing about the iron pillar of Delhi is its resistance to rust. It has been standing out in the open, exposed to the monsoon rains and the humid climate of Delhi for centuries. Any other piece of iron would have corroded into a pile of rust long ago, but this pillar is still standing with only minor corrosion. How is this possible? For years, it was a major metallurgical mystery. The quality of the iron seemed far beyond the capabilities of ancient Indian metalworkers. Some even suggested it was made from a meteorite or, again, using alien technology. In the 20th century, metallurgists finally figured out the secret. It's not alien technology. It's a testament to the incredible skill of ancient Indian blacksmiths. A team from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, led by Dr. R. Balasubramaniam, studied the pillar extensively. They found the answer lies in its unique chemical composition. The pillar was made by forge welding together many small lumps of wrought iron. This process was common in ancient India, but the iron they used was not pure. It had a very high phosphorus content. This was a byproduct of the way they smelted the iron ore using charcoal as fuel. Modern iron making aims to remove phosphorus because it makes the iron brittle. But in this case, the high phosphorus content was the key. The phosphorus in the iron reacted with the oxygen and moisture in the air. This process created a very thin protective layer on the surface of the pillar. This layer is a compound called iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate. It's a passive, protective film, only a few micrometers thick, that seals the iron from the atmosphere and prevents further rusting. In a sense, the pillar created its own rust-proof coating. The process was likely helped along by the specific Delhi climate and perhaps by ritual anointing of the pillar over the centuries. So the mystery is solved from a scientific point of view. It's a brilliant piece of ancient empirical chemistry. The Indian blacksmiths may not have known the exact chemical reason why it worked, but through generations of trial and error, they had perfected a technique for making rust-proof iron. But this raises its own spooky questions. How did they develop this incredible skill? This wasn't a lucky accident. It was a deliberate, sophisticated process. The pillar is a huge object, a major feat of engineering to forge and erect. It shows a level of metallurgical knowledge that was not matched in the West for another 1,000 years. What other lost metallurgical secrets did they have? And why was this technology for making rust-proof iron not more widely used and eventually forgotten? Number 1, what if the stories of a lost civilization are true? For centuries, there have been stories. Plato wrote about Atlantis, a great naval power that sank into the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. All over the world, there are myths of a great flood and an antediluvian civilization, before time when people had great knowledge. Most of modern archaeology considers these to be just myths. There was no Atlantis. There was no lost high-tech global civilization. But then you look at a place like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. It was discovered by Klaus Schmidt in the 1990s. It's a series of massive circular stone enclosures. The stones are huge, T-shaped pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, covered in intricate carvings of animals. And it is 12,000 years old. This has turned the story of human civilization on its head. Göbekli Tepe is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. It's older than the pyramids. It was built by people who were supposed to be simple hunter-gatherers. They hadn't even invented pottery or agriculture yet. But somehow they were able to organize the massive labor force needed to quarry, transport, and erect these monumental structures. It suggests that complex religion and social organization came before agriculture and settled cities, not the other way around, which is what we had always thought. Could places like Göbekli Tepe be the folk memory behind the myths of a lost golden age? What if there was an advanced civilization, maybe not with flying machines and lasers, but with a profound understanding of stonework, astronomy, and social organization that existed before the end of the last ice age? An ice age that ended around 11,700 years ago with a period of catastrophic sea level rise and climate change. A great flood. This is the theory put forward by authors like Graham Hancock in his book Fingerprints of the Gods. He argues that all of these out-of-place artifacts and ancient mysteries, from the Piri Reis map to the pyramids, are the legacy of a single lost maritime civilization that was wiped out by the end of the Ice Age. The few survivors, he suggests, traveled the world, spreading their knowledge of agriculture and architecture to the hunter-gatherer societies they encountered, kickstarting the civilizations of Egypt, Sumer, and the Americas. Mainstream archaeology rejects this idea almost entirely. They say there is no evidence for a global, advanced civilization in that period. They argue that civilizations developed independently all over the world. The similarities in their myths and building styles are either coincidence or the result of the human brain working in similar ways everywhere. They point out that Hancock is a journalist, not an archaeologist, and his theories are pseudoscience. But the puzzles remain. The Antikythera mechanism, the Dendera light, the Nebra sky disk. They all hint at a past that was much more complex and technically proficient than the standard story allows. I feel like echoes of something we have forgotten, so we are left with the biggest question of all. Are these 18 artifacts just isolated mysteries, strange exceptions to the rule of history? Or are they pieces of a much larger puzzle, clues that point to a completely different story of the human past? Is it possible that we are a species with amnesia, living amongst the ruins of a forgotten chapter of our own story, unable to read the writing on the wall?